Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Yashodanandana Vrajajanaranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Jamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Jamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Radha Kalachandji ki jai. Rantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayam udirayat nashta prayeshu abhadreshu samashloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki om ajnanatimarandhasya jnananjana shalakaya Chakshurun militam jena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Hare Krishna. Good morning, everyone. Assembled in person here or online. Today we are continuing on with the 6th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. We're hearing the backstory of Vritrasura, a king named Chitraketu was very anxious to have a son, and despite all his efforts for 10 million attempts with different queens, he was unable to produce a son because it was not in his destiny to have a son. Therefore, he was in great distress, and we will see in this 14th chapter that the great Rishi Angira comes to visit Chitraketu. And because he is in this very attached state, although he could be enlightened by this sage, the sage simply blesses him with this material desire to have a son. And we will see the results of fulfilling material desires, all of the complications, all of the heartbreak that comes with trying to be happy in material life. We're beginning with text 23, I believe. Yes, because yesterday, Angira Muni, we read that he approached Chitraketu and was asking about his welfare. And although the sage could tell the mind of Chitraketu, still he was asking him, are your wives happy? Are your citizens happy and protected? Is your mind under control? He asks many questions like this. So today we are hearing, starting from the response of Chitraketu. Text 23. King Chitraketu said, O great Lord Angira, because of austerity, knowledge, and transcendental samadhi, you are freed from all the reactions of sinful life. Therefore, as a perfect yogi, you can understand everything external and internal regarding embodied, conditioned souls like us. There was a similar comment in first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Does anyone remember? That someone can read the minds of others? Anyone remember? Yes? You can read people's faces and know what they're thinking. Yeah, so one example is Shukadev Goswami, that when he came, although he was only 16 years old, although he was actually not clothed, the sages there could tell by the features of his face and body that this was a very advanced person. And similarly, Vyasadeva describes Narada Muni in this way. I believe it's Narada Muni. He says you can understand, right, yeah. You can understand everything inside and out, just like the air, just like the wind that's moving everywhere. So next, text 24.
O great soul, you are aware of everything, yet you are asking me why I am full of anxiety. Therefore, in response to your order, let me disclose the cause.
As a person aggrieved by hunger and thirst is not pleased by the external gratification of flower garlands or sandalwood pulp, I am not pleased with my empire, opulence, or possessions, which are desirable even for great demigods, because I have no son.
This is a valuable lesson that will begin our discussion, is that even if you have everything in the whole universe that you could possibly dream of, but you're missing one thing, Drishtadyumna mentioned this yesterday, then you can't be happy. Just like a fish out of water, although it may have everything it needs oxygen, or it needs to be in the water to actually survive, to be happy. So like that, if we're not in a mood of gratitude, then we won't appreciate what we do have, and we will just long for that one thing that we don't. This is the danger of lacking gratitude and recognizing what we do have. Text 26.
Therefore, O great sage, please save me and my forefathers who are descending to the darkness of hell, because I have no progeny. Kindly do something so that I may have a son to deliver us from hellish conditions.
So it's important in the Vedic society to have a son who will free one from suffering reactions to bad karma after death. So the king is in anxiety about this. Next, text 27.
In response to the request of Maharaj Chitraketu, Angira Rishi, who was born of Lord Brahma's mind, was very merciful toward him. Because the sage was a greatly powerful personality, he performed a sacrifice by offering oblations of sweet rice to Twashta.
So we see that Angira is merciful to Chitraketu. The word in the Sanskrit here is kripalur, or kripalu. He is very merciful. But if we are very materially attached, then even a pure devotee may come. We may meet Srila Prabhupada or someone like Srila Prabhupada himself, and yet their mercy will come in the form of not the full Krishna consciousness they could give us. They could give us prema, pure love for Krishna, and yet if we are so stubbornly attached to having some material pleasures, we won't be able to avail of the greatest blessings of this pure devotee. So we need to be cautious to take good guidance from pure sources, from exalted devotees, but we also ourselves need to become pure. We need to have a heart which is like fertile soil, so that when the seed of bhakti is planted, it can sprout and grow. And we need to water that seed, that plant of bhakti, with regular hearing and chanting. So, Angira Muni is doing this sacrifice, and we'll see what happens next.
O Parikshit Maharaj, best of the Bharatas, the remnants of the food offered in Yagna were given by the great sage Angira to the first and most perfect among Chitraketu's millions of queens, whose name was Krita Dyuti.
Thereafter the great sage told the king, O great king, now you will have a son who will be the cause of both jubilation and lamentation. The sage then left without waiting for Chitraketu's response.
So the blessings of a great sage upon someone who's materially attached will maybe force us to go through some painful situation to learn a lesson. Because it's said that the most intelligent people learn by hearing, and less intelligent people learn by seeing, and even less intelligent people learn by experiencing themselves. Yes. And King Chitraketu here, again, we see that if we're materially attached, even we may hear some sage words, but we won't actually hear them as it is, as they are. So he hears, this son will cause lamentation. But he's thinking, oh, no problem, better a difficult son than no son at all. But if you have experience with a difficult child, I'm sure some of you can know that maybe that's not true. I can't speak from my experience, but there's this proverb which Prabhupada quotes that, what is the use of a son who is neither a learned scholar nor a devotee? Such a son is like a blind, diseased eye, which always causes suffering. So in our great attachment, we may want something, even if we know it may cause us suffering, and we can't really use our intelligence properly. So this is the danger of material attachment. Text 30, Jaishnav.
As Kritika Devi, after receiving the semen of Lord Shiva from Agni, conceived a child named Skanda Kartikeya, Kritadyuti, having received semen from Chitraketu, became pregnant after eating remnants of food from the yagna performed by Angira.
Text 31. After receiving semen from Maharaj Chitraketu, the king of Shurasena, Queen Kritadyuti gradually developed in her pregnancy, O King Parikshit, just as the moon develops during the bright fortnight.
Thereafter, in due course of time, a son was born to the king. Hearing news of this, all the inhabitants of the state of Shurasen were extremely pleased, because this would be the heir to the throne, right? So it's very good for the whole kingdom. Text 33.
King Chitraketu was especially pleased. After purifying himself by bathing and by decorating himself with ornaments, he engaged learned brahmanas in offering benedictions to the child and performing the birth ceremony.
Okay, so the celebration begins.
Unto the brahmanas who took part in the ritualistic ceremony, the king gave charity of gold, silver, garments, ornaments, villages, horses and elephants, as well as 60 crores of cows, 600 million cows.
So just like when Krishna was born, when he appeared, even in the jail, what did Vasudev do? In his mind, he offered charity to the brahmanas, because this is such an important feature of Vedic culture, is that the brahmanas should be worshipped and offered charity. Next.
Text 35. As a cloud indiscriminately pours water on the earth, the beneficent King Chitraketu, to increase the reputation, opulence, and longevity of his son, distributed like rainfall all desirable things to everyone.
This is a quality of the Kshatriyas, is to be charitable. Yes, text 36.
When a poor man gets some money after great difficulty, his affection for the money increases daily. Similarly, when King Chitraketu, after great difficulty, received a son, his affection for the son increased day after day.
Okay, so we're seeing what happens when you get the object of your material desire and how we become more and more bound to that object. Next.
The mother's attraction and attention to the son, like that of the child's father, excessively increased. The other wives, seeing Kritaduti's son, were very much agitated, as if by high fevers with a desire to have sons.
So you may get the object of your desire, but then people around you will be envious. And this is like a fever, this envy. And we'll see the results of envy. Go ahead.
As King Chitraketu fostered his son very carefully, his affection for Queen Krityaduti increased, but gradually he lost affection for the other wives who had no sons.
The other queens were extremely unhappy due to their being sonless. Because of the king's negligence towards them, they condemned themselves in envy and lamented.
So the neglect of the king was part of his fault here. So the queens, we can see, are very envious, and this is not proper. But at the same time, the king Chitraketu, he had some fault that he wasn't properly giving attention to his other wives.
A wife who has no sons is neglected at home by her husband and dishonored by her co-wives, exactly like a maidservant. Certainly, such a woman is condemned in every respect because of her sinful life.
Even maidservants who were constantly engaged in rendering service to the husband are honored by the husband, and thus they have nothing for which to lament. Our position, however, is that we are maidservants of the maidservant. Therefore, we are most unfortunate.
So this is really interesting. We see the exact opposite consciousness of a pure devotee, right? Because in Vritrasura's prayers, just a few chapters back, what did he say? He said, Aham hare tava padaika mula das anudaso bhavatasmi bhuya. Please, my Lord, make me the servant of your servant. And now the queens are saying, Dasya dasiva durbhaga. We are so unfortunate because we're the servants of the servant. So we see that the material world and the spiritual world are polar opposites. Krishna describes that it's like a tree with a reflection. So very interesting contrast here. Jaishnav.
Sri Shukadev Goswami continued, being neglected by their husband and seeing Kritadyuti's opulence and possessing a son, Kritadyuti's co-wives always burned in envy, which became extremely strong.
So this verse describes the manifestations of envy. So listen carefully.
43. As their envy increased, they lost their intelligence. Being extremely hard-hearted and unable to tolerate the king's neglect, they finally administered poison to the son.
So when envy increases, we first lose our intelligence. Second, we become hard-hearted. And due to losing intelligence and having a hard heart, then we do things that are harmful to others. We do vikarma, or even we can make aparads. So it's very dangerous, this envy. Next, Tammy.
Unaware of the poison administered by her co-wives, Queen Kritadyuti walked within the house, thinking that her son was sleeping deeply. She did not understand that he was dead.
Thinking that her child had been sleeping for a long time, Queen Kritadyuti, who was certainly very intelligent, ordered the nurse, "My dear friend, please bring my son here."
When the maidservant approached the child who was lying down, she saw that his eyes were turned upward. There were no signs of life, all his senses having stopped, and she could understand that the child was dead. Seeing this, she immediately cried, "Now I am doomed," and fell to the ground.
In great agitation, the maidservant struck her breast with both hands and cried loudly in regretful words. Hearing her loud voice, the queen immediately came, and when she approached her son, she saw that he was suddenly dead.
In great lamentation, her hair and dress in disarray, the queen fell to the ground unconscious. O King Parikshit, hearing the loud crying, all the inhabitants of the palace came, both men and women. Being equally aggrieved, they also began to cry. The queens who had administered the poison also cried portentously, knowing full well their offense.
So you see, if you do one lie, then you have to cover it up with other lies, right? This is the danger of not being truthful.
When King Chitraketu heard of his son's death from unknown causes, he became almost blind. Because of his great affection for his son, his lamentation grew like a blazing fire, and as he went to see the dead child, he kept slipping and falling on the ground. Surrounded by his ministers and other officers and the learned Brahmins present, the king approached and fell unconscious at the child's feet, his hair and dress scattered. When the king, breathing heavily, regained consciousness, his eyes were tearful and he could not speak.
So just imagine the drama of this scene. Everyone in the palace crying. The king can't even walk. He can't even see practically because he's so much in this inferno of lamentation. And yes, it's a very, very dramatic scene. If we want to watch movies and feel some drama, then just read the Srimad Bhagavatam and you'll get this same rasa we're looking for, and you'll get the instructions of pure devotees and the descriptions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
When the queen saw her husband, King Chitraketu, merged in great lamentation and saw the dead child, who was the only son in the family, she lamented in various ways. This increased the pain in the cores of the hearts of all the inhabitants of the palace, the ministers and all the brahmanas.
The garland of flowers decorating the queen's head fell, and her hair scattered. Falling tears melted the corium of her eyes and moistened her breasts, which were covered with kumkum powder. As she lamented the loss of her son, her loud crying resembled the sweet sound of kurari bird.
So now in this verse we will hear the consciousness of a devotee who is not very mature. So Krita Dyuti, she is talking to Krishna, she's speaking to the Lord, and yet we see that she is immature in her understanding of the Lord's position. So we'll go back and read the purport for this after we finish the chapter.
Alas, O Providence, O Creator, you are certainly inexperienced in creation, for during the lifetime of a father you have caused the death of his son, thus acting in opposition of your creative laws. If you are determined to contradict these laws, you are certainly the enemy of living entities and are never merciful.
So she's saying, God, you don't know what you're doing. You're not very good at your job. You should be fired and replaced. Okay, next.
My Lord, you may say that there is no law that a father must die in the lifetime of his son and that a son must be born in the lifetime of his father. Since everyone lives and dies according to his own fruitive activity, however, if fruitive activity is so strong that birth and death depend upon it, there is no need of a controller or God. Again, if you say that a controller is needed because the material energy does not have the power to act, one may answer that if the bonds of affection you have created are disturbed by fruitive action, no one will raise children with affection. Instead, everyone will cruelly neglect his children. Since you have cut the bonds of affection that compel a parent to raise his child, you appear inexperienced and unintelligent.
Can you imagine? Krishna, you don't know what you're doing. You're foolish. So Krishna's pure devotees speak to him in this way. It's very different. In the spiritual world, Krishna's friends, they will sometimes correct him. They'll sometimes call him names. Krishna's gopis will do the same. They'll chastise him. Krishna's mother, Yashoda. But this is very different. This is a conditioned soul in ignorance, criticizing the Lord.
My dear son, I am helpless and very much aggrieved. You should not give up my company. Just look at your lamenting father. We are helpless because without a son, we shall have to suffer the distress of going to the darkest hellish regions. You are the only hope by which we can get out of these dark regions. Therefore, I request you not to go any further with the merciless Yama.
So now she's speaking to her dead son out of her great delusion of this state she's in.
My dear son, you have slept a long time. Now please get up. Your playmates are calling you to play. Since you must be very hungry, please get up and suck my breast and dissipate our lamentation.
Text 58. My dear son, I'm certainly most unfortunate, for I can no longer see your mild smiling. You have closed your eyes forever. I therefore conclude that you have been taken from this planet to another, from which you will not return. My dear son, I can no longer hear your pleasing voice.
Sri Shukadev Goswami continued, accompanied by his wife, who was thus lamenting for her dead son. King Chitraketu began crying loudly with an open mouth. Can you imagine? That's an intense type of cry, if you're crying with an open mouth. Being greatly aggrieved. Next.
As the king and queen lamented, all their male and female followers joined them in crying. Because of the sudden accident, all the citizens of the kingdom were almost unconscious.
Finally, when the great sage Angira understood that the king was almost dead in an ocean of lamentation, he went there with Narada Rishi. So we must be cautious to prepare ourselves to receive good instruction. Otherwise, we may have to go through some situation like Chitraketu and his queens. So if we have a receptive, humble, tolerant, respectful attitude, then when a great soul approaches, so many great souls visit Radhakalachandji Dham, and we can receive their instructions and we can very quickly advance. But if they can tell that we are very materially disturbed and more materially attached, and like we say, the 10th offense to the holy name is to maintain material attachments even after understanding so many instructions. So if we're actively cultivating our material attachments, then when great sages speak to us, they'll be able to tell, and they will perhaps give us a blessing like we see Chitraketu here, or who's another in Damodar Lila? The two, Nalakuvara and Manigriva, they were also cursed by Narada Muni, and they had to go through a lot of trouble before they achieved perfect Krishna consciousness. So, we'll go back and see text 54. Yes. We're running short on time, so I'll just read it. We can do call and response one time and go on. Aho vidhatas tvam ativa balisho yas tvatma srishtya pratirupam ihase pare no jivatya parasya yamratir viparyayaschet tvamasi dhruva para. Please read along with me the synonyms. Aho, alas, in great lamentation. Vidhata, O providence. Tvam, you. Ativa, very much. Balisha, inexperienced. Ya, who. Tu, indeed. Atma srishti, of your own creation. Apratirupam, just the opposite. Ihase, you are performing and desiring. Pare, while the father or the elder. Nu, indeed. Jivati is living. Aparasya, of one who was born later. Ya, which. Mriti, death. Viparyaya, contradictory. Chet, if. Tvam, you. Asi, are. Dhruva, indeed. Para, an enemy. As if you are an enemy. The last line. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. Kritadyuti says to the Lord, Alas, O Providence, O Creator, you are certainly inexperienced in creation, for during the lifetime of a father, you have caused the death of his son, thus acting in opposition to your creative laws. If you are determined to contradict these laws, you are certainly the enemy of living entities and are never merciful. Can you imagine? God, you are the enemy of everyone. You know, in a pure consciousness, in a calm state of mind right now, we can see the foolishness of words like this. But when we're emotionally agitated, we also think and say things that are very foolish. And later on, we regret, right? Oh, why did I say such a stupid thing? So we need to be very cautious about being overly agitated by emotions. Just like Chitraketu and the whole kingdom, when the sun appeared, then they were in great jubilation. And then when the sun died, everyone was in great lamentation. So harsha shoka. Srila Prabhupada will give us some comments on the conditioned soul's misunderstanding of the Lord's position. He says, this is the way a conditioned soul condemns the Supreme Creator when he meets reverses. Sometimes he accuses the Supreme Personality of Godhead of being crooked, because some people are happy and some are not. Here the queen blames Supreme Providence for her son's death. Following the creative laws, a father should die first and then his son. If the creative laws are changed according to the whims of Providence, then Providence certainly should not be considered merciful, but must be considered inimical to the created being. Actually, it is not the Creator, but the conditioned soul who is inexperienced. He does not know how the subtle laws of fruitive activity work, and without knowledge of these laws of nature, he ignorantly criticizes the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, it appears very foolish. It is very foolish to speak to Krishna in this way. Yet, we may also find ourselves doing something similar. So Srila Prabhupada says that it's not the creator, but the conditioned soul who is inexperienced. So just consider that, is there something in my life that is disturbing me right now? Is there some person who is disturbing me? Some situation that is causing me anger, frustration? Then perhaps it may be a result of thinking that I wish the situation were different, or maybe, we're not thinking this, but maybe Krishna could have arranged this better. Maybe he doesn't actually know. Obviously, he wouldn't put this difficult person in my life if he knew what he was doing, right? Obviously, he wouldn't make it so cold in Dallas if he knew that I needed to be, happy here. So our core problem is this deeply rooted belief that happiness comes from sense gratification. This deeply rooted belief that I am the controller, I am the enjoyer in this world. And this world is supposed to be a pleasure place, a playground for my enjoyment. And due to this misunderstanding from ahankar, from the false ego, then we may subtly criticize Krishna as Krita Duty is doing. We don't think it, maybe, but in our emotion we can see that we don't fully trust that this is the best for us. Otherwise, what's the consciousness of a pure devotee? Tattenu kampam susamikshamano bhunjanam evatma kritam vipakam. So, because of one's own past activities, krita, then my suffering is my responsibility. It's due to my actions. Like in the Gita also, Krishna says that the Supreme Lord doesn't assume anyone's sinful or pious activities. He doesn't take responsibility because it's our ultimate responsibility that we've chosen to leave the all blissful spiritual world to come to this dungeon of the material world, which is dark, it's enclosed, and it's a place of pain. It's a dukhalayam ashashvatam. Everything that we love will be forcibly taken from us, and everything that we don't want will be forcibly pushed onto us. And therefore, we are ultimately to blame. We don't tell this to others who are suffering. We don't say, you're the cause of your suffering. This is your karma. That's not compassionate. But for ourselves, a devotee considers that whatever difficulty I'm going through in my life, this is my responsibility. It's because of the misdeeds in my past. And so what does the pure devotee do? Hridvagvapur vididhan namaste jiveta yo mukti pade sadayaba. That with the heart, the words, and the mind, they offer respects to Krishna and serve him, knowing very well that by so doing, by serving Krishna in this consciousness of gratitude, of responsibility for one's own suffering, for sure I will go back to Godhead one day. Because like the heir to a great fortune, in order to receive that fortune, they simply have to stay alive. And in the right time, they will receive the great wealth that is their birthright. So like that, all souls are children of Krishna. And if we just serve him in a favorable way, then it's for sure we will attain the highest destination of going back to Godhead. The challenge is to take responsibility for the suffering in our life and to not become victim mentality, to not blame others for our suffering. This doesn't mean that we don't try to remedy great suffering. We don't just let someone beat us emotionally, physically. We do seek help. We try to alleviate our emotional and physical suffering so that we can go on in peaceful consciousness. But some things just are there for a very good reason. Some things, maybe year after year after year, are still there. Some people, some situations, some health crisis, they just somehow stick around despite everything we try to do to change the situation, to change a person. Okay, and then we simply have to accept Krishna has put this thing, person, situation in my life because he loves me, because he's an expert surgeon, and he's removing the disease from my heart. I was thinking that if Kritya Duty, if a devotee like this were getting a surgery done, what she's saying is basically telling the surgeon that he doesn't know how to operate. The surgeon comes and gives a diagnosis, a prescription. Okay, we're going to have to put you under and we'll cut open your heart and do a surgery. And then the patient says, you don't know what you're doing. You're actually trying to harm me. So this is basically what she's saying. So the main lesson that I see here for us as devotees attempting to become pure is that let's take responsibility for the difficulties in our life and to recognize that Krishna has put these difficulties in our life for good reason. Like Angira Muni arranged for this son, which would cause great lamentation, out of his, because Kripalu, we saw in the Sanskrit, he's merciful. This was his mercy. So in the same way, Krishna's mercy may come in the form of some hardship. But if we hear about Krishna daily by attending classes, by hearing, by reading Prabhupada's books, then we can learn, oh, Krishna is so merciful. Even to someone like Putana, who tried to kill him, he awarded this position of a mother, of a nurse in the spiritual world. Then what to speak of me? I'm trying my best to serve Krishna. I'm definitely not trying to kill him. I'm not actively criticizing him as we see here. I'm trying my best. I struggle in many ways. But how merciful will Krishna be to me? And that's why in that verse that Brahma says, Jiveta yo mukti pade sadaya bhak, that the devotee is expecting Krishna's anukampa, his compassion, because they know. Because if we hear about Krishna constantly, we will know for sure this is the most merciful person, and especially Lord Chaitanya, Namo Mahavaranyaya. He's even more merciful than Krishna. So it's all very hopeful if we simply hear about Krishna. We just need to hear about Krishna. That is the secret of Krishna consciousness, is Shravanam. We just hear and hear and hear and hear. And Bhagavatam says in the 7th chapter of the 1st canto, Yasyam vai shuyamanayam Krishne paramapurushe bhaktir utpadyate pungsa shoka moha bhayadaya. By hearing about Krishna from Srimad Bhagavatam, what is the result? Bhakti sprouts in our heart immediately, the verse says. And lamentation, shoka, as we see here, harsha and shoka, moha, illusion, and bhaya, fear, all disappear. If we just hear Srimad Bhagavatam regularly, if we hear about Krishna, then we get love for Krishna, and all of our distress goes away, and we feel blissful, and we can dance and chant back to Godhead and help many others do the same. So thank you all for hearing some reflections from Brihat Mridanga Das. Yes, and I'd love to hear others' reflections. If we can please pass the microphone to Tulsi Saki. Questions we will allow as well. Yes. You have many realizations. And I actually just got to go to the Gurukul yesterday. And your daughter Gandharvika, I'd never really seen her before. I've seen her, but I was so impressed. What an amazing person. And I was telling Drishtadyumna after that, such a compliment to the parents to see a wonderful child. And so just really appreciating you so much more after meeting your daughter.
Thank you. She's her own self. So, two questions, Prabhu. Thank you for wonderful class. And since we're talking about Krita Duty, I can also express my ignorance just like she is. Today's my chance. The feeling of envy is something that we cannot utilize in Krishna's service. That is, we hear the only emotion that we can't dovetail. So where does envy originate? Yes, we cannot blame Krishna for envy. So it's just like sometimes we say lust is coming from a perverted reflection of love. Is envy having something where we can understand it? And the second question is...
Let's discuss the first
one.
Yeah.
Okay.
So one perspective is that in the spiritual world there is competition. And envy can manifest in competitiveness, but it's inimical competition, that I want you to be degraded so I look better. And I want to be the only one who's happy. So it's this self-centered competition and at the expense of others. But selfless competition, as we see in the spiritual world, is like the gopis, that they do want to be with Krishna. They have pure love for Krishna, but their mood is, I want you to be with Krishna. And they compete. There's the different camps of gopis, and they have different moods and different ways that they think of serving Krishna best. So we see this in the spiritual world. We also see Srila Prabhupada encouraging devotees in book distribution especially to compete in a loving way. So this is one perspective. Are there other thoughts on this question before we move on? The origin of envy, how we can understand? Yeah, Drishtadyumna. Please speak into the mic. Yeah.
It was very small, but yeah, there's different camps. So we're in Radharani's camp, and they're envious of Chandravali's camp. So
yeah, but the difference is they have this mood of humility, respect, pure love, for Krishna. And that's at the center. So if love for Krishna is missing, then competition turns into degrading competition at the expense of others. So how does this sound to you?
That's wonderful. Just like you were saying, the gopas, I will touch Krishna first, I will touch Krishna first. So okay, so whenever we feel envious, we just have to see, okay, it's like a healthy, try to turn it to a healthy competition.
Yeah, and it can increase our service, our quality and quantity of service, because we see that, wow, Nrsimha Rupa Prabhu, although he has children and a wife and so much responsibility, still he's coming and sitting in Srimad Bhagavatam class, still he's doing so much, we can appreciate. And then if he's able to do it, I want to do more now. And we can all inspire each other and uplift each other. Yeah, Drishtadyumna. I have to take opportunities to glorify you, Prabhu, because you do. I don't usually get the chance.
I have kind of a little bit of a materialistic devotee perspective on envy. I had gotten to kind of a squabble with this devotee. I have a perspective in this way. So I got into a squabble with a devotee, and I remember I was like, I have to be at Mangal Arti, because if this devotee I squabbled with is there, then he's winning. So in a way, I dovetailed envy. It was mixed. It was motivated, and it was out of envy. But somehow I was like, if I'm the one who's fallen all over the place and whatever, that means I'm losing. So.
Yeah. Okay. You please ask your second question. Yeah.
Hare Krishna. So the second question is again. In these verses, we read that, the wives are saying, the servant of the servant, what a
we're so unfortunate. Yeah.
And in our movement, we try to cultivate the mood of being the servant of the servant. So my question is, when we're cultivating the mood of the servant, are we getting attached, or is our meditation ultimately to get attached to Krishna as the servant of the servant? Or does it practically happen that we get attached to the servants that we are serving? And then what is our mood as we get attached to the servant of the servant? What is the rasa? What is, like, do we have a separate emotion for Krishna? Do we have separate emotion for the servants that we serve?
Wow. Very thoughtful question. It's far beyond my pay grade. I can share a few reflections. For sure, our goal is to attain love of Krishna and attachment for Krishna. And at the same time, attachment for the pure devotee is what leads us to develop that love for Krishna. Like, I think it's in Rishabhadev's teachings that attachment to a materialistic person who's just interested in sense gratification opens the doorways to darkness. And tamo dwara yoshitam sangi sangam, mahantaste samachita prashanta. That the attachment, when directed towards a sadhu, then it opens the doors to liberation. And as far as our mood and rasa, this question is far beyond my understanding. But I can just share one thing that I heard with Kalakanta Prabhu that struck me, is that our mood with our spiritual master, or shiksha or diksha, will develop over time, and it may begin at the dasya kind of relationship. Although that dasya mood never goes away, we may develop a type of friendly relationship. And even, he was pointing out, at the end of the spiritual master's manifest presence, we may develop a kind of parental mood with them, where we're serving them their physical form, we're bringing them food and taking care of them. So this is one small reflection I can share. I'd love to hear other points on this.
I equally feel this is well beyond my pay grade, but just a few thoughts that come to mind. That when His Holiness Haladhar Maharaj was here in Dallas, he really was kind of like hammering this point throughout all of his classes, that we have no qualifications on our own, and that our qualification is that to the degree that we are assisting our spiritual master and their service for us, Srila Prabhupada, then that's our qualification. To the degree that we see ourselves, I'm just trying my best to assist my spiritual master in their service to Srila Prabhupada, that's our qualification. And so I was thinking along those same lines, that relationship of becoming attached to the servant naturally leads you to who are they the servant of. And so that we have a personal relationship, just like with Krishna, we have our own unique personal relationship. And the reason I become attached to this servant is because of who they're serving, right? So there's that natural connection. Otherwise, I'm not attached to this person just because they're a servant of some random person, right? There's that connection goes all the way up to Krishna like that. Yeah, I think those were my...
Thank you. It reminds me too that the gratitude goes on and doesn't just go away. Oh, now I have Krishna, so I'm not going to think about this pure devotee who helped me. We see Dhruva Maharaj, that when he was getting on the Vaikuntha airplane, he was thinking of his mother, Suniti. Oh, how grateful I am, and I can't go back to Godhead without her. And Prahlad Maharaj says, I was just like in a well full of snakes, and now I'm in this position of Krishna consciousness. How could I ever forget my guru? So I really appreciate this point that we see in Bhagavatam, that the gratitude we feel for our pure devotee guides who brought us to Krishna never goes away, and in fact increases over time. Our attachment to them increases as we get closer to Krishna. Yeah, yes, Prabhu.
I just forgot the other side to that Maharaj was making, the point that he was making, is that then the spiritual masters, the way they see it is that I have actually no qualification, but my spiritual master has sent these devotees to assist me in my service to him. So it's like that loop continues.
In thinking of one's disciples, if one has them, that's what he was saying.
Yeah, like Prabhupada said, all of his disciples were sent by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta to assist him in his service to his Guru Maharaj. So that same kind of mood, so it kind of reciprocates both ways.
And my spiritual master has sent these devotees to help me in my service to him. Yes. Yeah, sweet. Yes, we'll do this final comment or question.
I have a question, but I have a revelation. Just some kind of reflection on the last topic. I was listening to a lecture and they mentioned that you want to achieve success in anything in life, you got to associate yourself with like-minded people or people you really want to idolize. So when I think about dasanudas, servant of servant, like I think about like the whole disciplic succession. I think about how someone who's serving who you want to be or who you want to serve is a direct reflection of what you can do, right? So if you associate yourself with the servant of the servant and serve them with love, you're basically trying to imbibe, embed, inculcate all the qualities that they have in their journey towards what they do for the love of Krishna. So I mean, just a feeling there,
Thank you. Thank you.
And then I have a question. So my question is more on Chitrakeshu. He's the king, and then king has a duty dharma as per Bhagavatam in terms of keeping religiosity and a few other aspects. And in keeping religiosity, the key is for the king to continue his rule and be able to serve the brahmanas, serve the kingdom, and protect the cows and everything else. In that duty, if he doesn't have a progeny, won't that dharma, fall at the feet of just what happens? So, it almost makes me feel at one hand there is dharma and the other hand there is Krishna's superior will, which is, you're not going to have a progeny. So I don't have an answer.
Well, Prabhu, I think his material attachment goes beyond just being a responsible king, because a king can have other methods of continuing on the rule. He can have, I believe in that culture, you could have a child with, was it the sister? There's some adjustments in times of emergency. It's called upadharma. In times of emergency, you can adjust the ordinary dharma for the sake of the well-being of society. Sure, okay, yeah. So there's different ways that he could have gone on as a responsible king, but he clearly was attached to having his own son, and this was the problem. And clearly, as Drishtadyumna was telling us, after maybe 5 attempts, you might think something's off here. Maybe there's a different plan for me. Maybe God has a different plan for this kingdom. So 1,000, 1,000,000, very intense material attachment. Yeah, a thoughtful question, Prabhu. How does this sound?
Thank you for the answer. I have just an additional question on this. So let's say a devotee in his karmic duty is doing a job, for the sustenance of his family. Let's say he loses his job, he applies 5 times, doesn't get a job. So should he just take it as Krishna's will and move on?
This takes expert guidance. So one would need to know the circumstances in detail, and someone who is a mature devotee could guide that person. Because like Srila Prabhupada, his material life collapsed. His family was not into his preaching at all, and his business, although he was trying his best for decades, just collapsed again and again, and he lost everything. And so he eventually realized, when his wife finally sold his Srimad Bhagavatam for some crackers for her tea, he said, I must go. It's finished. So one would need expert guidance in that situation. Yeah. Thank you for the thoughtful questions and reflections, all the assembled devotees. All the credit goes to His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Have a wonderful day, dear devotees. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhu bheva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnava.